Hello everyone. It's James again. And before I start today's show, I just want to quickly say, all work in this video contains 100% original content of and by myself James Smith, otherwise known as Bgood 4000, and was uniquely created with NAWMAL software, by myself James Smith. As I purchased commercial rights from NAWMAL to produce my unique and original video with this software. Commentary is uniquely my own thoughts, feelings, and expressions. Now that I have that out of the way, today I have a special guest named Mary. Mary wanted to come on today to talk about her experiences growing up in a home with a narcissist mother, and the troubles this presented in her growing up years, along with the troubles this also presented in her adult life. And first off, I want to say thank you, Mary, for coming on today to tell your story.
Thank you for having me on your show, James. I greatly appreciate it. This topic of narcissism is so important. It's literally ruining people's lives, while the narcissist is left to do this to another person and another person and another. So again, thank you for letting me be on your show today. I really do appreciate it.
Anytime, Mary. We are glad to have you. To get the interview started, before we go into your story about you growing up with a narcissist mother, you just touched on something in your opening statements about how the narcissist pretty much goes from one person to another doing what they tend to do, which is causing a great amount of damage and pain to a great many people's lives out there. Why is it, do you think, they are able to go about doing this in society over and over again?
That's a very good question, James. I think this problem has many moving parts to it, but the most important seems to be the encouragement of narcissistic behavior by those in positions of influence. All the while these individuals are naming what they are doing as encouraging and something positive and somehow different than mistreating someone, or what we call the behavior traits of a narcissist. It has become more and more socially acceptable, it seems, to just discard someone that isn't matching up to one's fantasy ideal of what a spouse or a friend should really be. To me, on the surface of things, I see it and am utterly disgusted. But on a deeper level, I'm still utterly disgusted, but I can see the evil of the narcissist hard at work behind the scenes, so to speak. Hard at work to try to normalize getting narcissistic supply from others in our society, so they can do what it is they do and possibly get praised for their terrible behaviors.
I do agree with what you just said, Mary. The narcissist seems to be on the go, always looking for a way to slip undetected into society. And I to believe those narcissists that are in positions of influence are working hard to normalize narcissism, so they can have an easy time of it to get the narcissistic supply they crave. With that being said, let's shift gears here. Please tell us a bit more about your situation. You can start anywhere you feel comfortable starting.
Well, I was born into a family with one brother and two sisters. I, like many in this community, noticed something was very much wrong with my home life. My mother seemed to always have a problem with something my father was doing or not doing. She seemed never satisfied, yet to the public, she tried to portray the perfect family. But behind closed doors there was a lot of arguing and yelling. It turns out after my father had discovered my mother having numerous affairs on him, my mother ironically enough divorced my father and took my father to court to obtain custody of myself and my siblings. And during these growing up years, my mother talked quite badly about my father to us. When we had visitations with him, it always had to be supervised, which I found to be very odd and strange. And though I didn't know everything that was going on, and I didn't completely understand the dynamics, as I was quite young of course, I did find it very strange and odd that everyone just on face value of things believed my mother, and every word she said. No proof, no nothing, it was just my father was a bad man and that was it. Thankfully my father is still living and I was able to reconnect with him and hear his side of things. But to go back to my growing up years, My narcissist mother did everything she could to ruin my self-esteem. Even though she had really nice clothing, she would dress me in really odd stuff that would eventually lead me to get picked on at school. I look back now, and I believe it was because she knew I had real genuine feelings, and I could see something was wrong with her. My older brother and sister seemed to go along with her madness. Yet, I and my younger sister got the scapegoat treatment. My mother would tell everyone that I was just a shy, different youngster, that I was an oddball. The truth of the matter was I was none of those things. I was just living in a very bad home, with a really terrible mother that prevented my father from helping me. My mother would tell others how strange her life was because she always had to worry if I was okay or not. I would hear her on the telephone with her friends, talking about how me being mistreated at school was somehow my inability to make friends and that it was causing her anxiety. Though I knew my mother was a liar, I still greatly blamed myself for a great many things that were going on at that moment. It was really hard, you know.
That seems to be the MO for the narcissist. Especially the narcissist parent. To cause a problem, but then to project the origin of that problem onto you. As if it's a built-in safety mechanism they have to make themselves blameless for everything they do to others.
Yes, I completely agree, because as I look back, nothing was ever my mother's fault, yet she was always the center of the chaos that was going on in her life. Yet no one called her out on it. At least at the time. Years later I finally did. But the courts, the neighbors, no one. And you see, my father, he was stuck. He came from a family very similar with a narcissist mother and a completely absent father. So he had no one there to help him with his legal battles with trying to be there for us. I remember my mother saying to us on a few occasions, "If your father loved you he would fight for you harder." Though I knew my father loved me and I indeed loved my father, it really messed my mind up along with my self-confidence.
Do you feel like your mother was trying to isolate you?
Yes, now looking back at it, I do. My mother seemed to want to have unchecked control over our lives. Though my older brother and sister were my mother's favorite, their lives weren't great either. It was like living in an evil circus. But when I grew up and I thought I had my life sorted out, I was able to move away, and eventually my younger sister did the same. But we both found ourselves in these very toxic patterns. I ended up with two really bad men. That I now believe I tried so hard with these men that were likely narcissists just like my mother, because I quite simply felt sorry for my father and what he went through. And I also wanted to fix my mother, though that was never possible.
What did you think that fixing your mother would do? Or fixing these men would do?
Well, for starters, now looking back at things, I think I was trying to fix these narcissist men. Because if I could do that, I would have the formula to go back and fix my mother so she could love me. It really hurt me that my mother, the one that brought me into this world, didn't have the ability to love me. I remember my mother screaming and hollering about nonsense in all hours of the morning and night, when I had to get up tired, and put on my funny-looking clothes and go to school a mental mess. Then to come home to hear from my mother how I stressed her out so badly. And it's because of me she can't have a proper life. If I washed the dishes she would rewash them and said she had to always redo everything I did because I was a messy slob. My mother even said to me that she should have let my father have me because I was causing her life too much stress. I think I felt that if I could have made those bad situations right, that I could have had some sort of closure.
So how did you figure out these situations were toxic and that they wouldn't provide the closure that you were looking for?
Because I was so lucky to reconnect with my father. Now my father isn't perfect by any stretch. I know that, but he really loved us and he still does. He still apologizes to this day for not being able to prevent us from having the difficult growing up that we had. But there's nothing he could have done. The courts wouldn't believe him. But it was conversations I had with him. and he told me the truth about what was going on with he and my mother. And it made me think about how I was being treated by the last man I was with. The same tactics my mother used on my father and myself and the rest of us. This man was using on me too. I started to look things up on the internet and I found channels like yours and a few others. And it all started to make sense. So now, I'm just day by day doing the self-work, trying to better my life. And I live with my youngest sister who is going through the self-work as well.
I'm so glad you are making these discoveries. And you are going down a positive road in your life. What challenges are you finding while doing this self-work?
I find that I get feelings like I missed out on so much. And I want to go back in time. Yet I can't. I missed out on friends, dances, good times, and love. I wish I had a normal family. A real family. Most of the hugs that I've received in my life were fake. Except for my father and youngest sister. However, these hugs came from people that wanted bad for me. They pretended to love me one moment. And the next they were trying to ruin my life. It's hard to deal with sometimes. I feel like I wasted time because I didn't know what I was dealing with.
I think what you're feeling is to be expected when coming from such a home. People do so much better in life when they are loved and they can give love. It's not a normal thing to have a parent or parents work very hard to make a son or daughter feel bad about themselves and lie to them and try to ruin their lives. That can and will leave a mark. And I'm sorry you went through that. You were young and had no way to know what the right road was to escape on and to better yourself. And I believe this is what the narcissist parent or parents are banking on. Because at the time we were solely dependent on them for all of our life information.
Right, James, you are indeed spot on right about that, and that's what pulls me back to center. When I get so down on myself, or I have a bad day thinking about the past, I say to myself, though things are in no way ideal, how was I to know all of these things at such a young age? Yes, I wish I grew up in a nice loving home. But that didn't happen. But James, I must tell you, I'm glad to have my sister in my life. I know there are many that are going this journey alone. And I have my sister, though I wish she had never had to go through this mess as well. And I have my father, he is now learning about narcissism. And he's finally putting together the pieces of the puzzle of his life. But this is the thing, James, though I know, and you know, we were young and there is no way for us to have known what was going on. I get very upset that this problem hasn't been acknowledged in places that could make a difference in the family experience, such as the family court. I see people in the world talking about getting what they can get out of people and dumping them to the side like they are nothing. I heard recently, if a man doesn't buy some fancy designer handbag for his lady friend then he needs to be dumped promptly. I just think to myself, what has this world come to? But then I slow down and think, this is narcissism. My mother would complain and say if we didn't do this or do that, then we didn't love her. Again, I could do a household chore for hours, and she would belittle me and the chore I was doing, and then claim to have to redo my work because I was no good at anything. Well, I'll look at that and I look at my ex, as he used to talk to me the same way. And then someone on social media saying if some man doesn't buy this fancy handbag, that he's worthless. I look at it as all the same thing. It's the tactic of the narcissist to lower your self-esteem and self-worth. It's to get you to think, if you do this or do that, that they, meaning the narcissist, will somehow change and stop being a narcissist. And this tactic is spreading into the mainstream and praised in society as something to aspire to. When it's not, it's something to get away from. If you are in a relationship with someone that says you have to buy them this, or take them here or there, for them to love you, I hate to break it to you. They don't love you, they never did and they never will.
You are so correct, Mary. So correct. So was your mother belittling you something you found normal within your exes that were doing the same thing?
Yes, I think so, James. I think that when we grow up, certain things get programmed into us by sheer repetition. The problem with growing up with a narcissist parent is the repetitions are mostly negative and toxic. Those that grew up in healthy families, they likely had positive repetitions. Where we that grew up in a home with a narcissist, we grew up with negative and toxic repetitions. And I was love-bombed pretty heavily as well, and I wanted to believe they loved me. So I kept trying to get that love back. And my mother would tell me that my relationships going wrong were all my fault. And then one day, I realized she was partially right, and my fault was staying in them as long as I did. But again, that's needing to pull oneself to center, and to realize I didn't have the tools to know how to properly help myself.
Yes. I completely understand where you're coming from, Mary. As it took me quite a long time to figure things out as well.
But that's the thing, isn't it, James? We are in the corner a mess trying to figure it all out. Yet the narcissist has moved on to doing this to another person and another person.
What do you think is the answer?
Awareness and admitting the truth of what narcissists are and what they are capable of.
Great points indeed. I completely agree. Well, I think this is a good place to pause and stop this interview. We'll upload it as part 1. And then we'll come back for part 2. How does that sound, Mary?
Sounds good. I will be here for part 2, James.
Well, everyone, thanks for watching today. And thank you, Mary, for sharing your story with us today. This is my first time having a guest on my channel. So we'll see how it goes. And we'll be back for part 2. With that said, please don't forget to subscribe, like, comment and share. And if you would like to support this channel even further, you can do so by the way of the Patreon link in the description box below. And to those that are already supporting, I want to say thank you, thank you, thank you. With that said, I do hope your day is blessed. And until next time, bye for now. And be good to yourself.